To all the listeners today, I got a special guest, Benjamin Smith, founder of Disco, all natural skincare brand for men. But I wanted to say, dude, I can't remember exactly how I started following you. I think you were reposted by another page I follow, and I really liked all your content on philosophy and health optimization. But before we get to the nitty gritty, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your background and who you are as a person?
Yeah, so my name is Benjamin Smith. I'm the founder of Disco Skincare, which is a natural skincare brand for men. I personally have been interested in sort of optimizing my health, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, for the better part of 10 to 12 years, sort of towards the end of high school. So I'm about 30 now, and that's sort of transformed over time, starting from just being interested in the weight room to getting more interested into my diet. On top of that, to eventually getting interested into things like sauna and cold plunge and peptides and hormones and blood work and optimizing my wakeful schedule and meditation, etc. So it's kind of morphed over time as I've become more and more familiar with the health and wellness industry and space. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. I live here in Austin, Texas as well.
Nice. How do you like Austin?
Big fan. Yeah, I've been here ever since I graduated college, so the better part of 8 years now. So yeah, it's definitely warm. I am, a child of the Mid-Atlantic, sort of DC, Baltimore area. So it's certainly not like, Boston or New York in terms of coldness and snow, but it gets cold there. So I'm happy to live in a place that doesn't really get cold too often.
Same. So I'm in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, which is
There you go.
pretty similar to Austin, Texas. But before we get into more details of health and philosophy, I wanted to ask you some questions about Burning Man, because I saw a lot of the pictures that you posted last year of Burning Man, and I've heard a little bit about Burning Man, but I don't know exactly what it is. But can you tell us and tell the audience a little bit about Burning Man and your experience?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So Burning Man is a gathering in a desert outside of Reno in Nevada, about 2 or 3 hour drive outside of Reno. And essentially it's just a gathering of what I would call fairly open-minded folks to share a pretty life-changing experience, which includes, art and talks about wellness and sex and psychedelics and many other things for that matter too, as well as, enjoying ourselves from a dancing standpoint too. But, it was really founded upon like the art component and sort of morphed into something more than that. So, yeah, there's about 80,000 people that go annually. That was my first burn. I would have liked to have gone before, but for various reasons, like missed 2018 and 19, and then 2020, there was COVID. So, I ended up there when I was supposed to get there. But yeah, honestly, my experience, could not have been better. I had probably what I would call like the best 8 or 9 days of my life. So I was there for 1 or 2 days before it started, and sort of one day at the end. And frankly, next year I'll probably go and help my camp build as well. So yeah, in terms of what I experienced, think of it as sort of like a video game where you basically each day wake up, whatever time schedule you, sort of find yourself in, and can do whatever you want. There's not really, a few camps have Wi-Fi and stuff, but for the most part, nobody's using their phones. Nobody has any responsibilities, like sort of in the default world or, where we are now. And so everyone's super present, men, women, everyone in between. Nobody really has any plan for the day. So you kind of just wake up with this like clean slate, tabula rasa, if you will, and can do whatever you want. You can go see art exhibits. You can go check out music. You can, go imbibe with your friends. Like it's just totally endless in terms of the possibilities. And then you add on top like the amazing art and music and whatnot. And it just is truly like the most surreal and unique experience I've ever been a part of in my life. And so anyone who's thinking of going, it's certainly challenging because it's very, very hot during the day. You have to prepare quite a bit in terms of what you bring. It also can be a bit debilitating, like in the middle of Burning Man when, you're kind of sleep deprived, it's hot, like, you don't have all your comforts, and that's a good thing. So that's the only thing I would just sort of asterisk is saying like, hey, it's not all like beautiful Instagram models and what it might look like just on social media. It can be challenging, but it's all for the better. So
Right.
long story short, I couldn't recommend it more. Regardless of whether you're into art or music or house music or lasers or whatever, as long as you're a fairly open-minded person and like to have fun, you'll have a blast.
Right. Love that. And fairly open-minded. What do you mean by fairly open-minded? Is that the opposite of being in the Matrix?
I don't necessarily, no, not necessarily referring to like red pill versus blue pill type thinking. I'm more saying like, if you're really rigid and not comfortable with, being out of your routine and not comfortable with seeing people express themselves in a radical way, which is one of the tenets of Burning Man, radical self-expression. I don't mean that in a cliche way. Like people are naked, like people are certainly taking plant medicines, and really enjoying themselves. But the thing about Burning Man that's interesting is like I think from an outside perspective, many people think it's kind of just like a drug fest where people just go to party and stuff.
Right.
And certainly, like people do enjoy themselves there. But for the most part, in the 9 days I was there, I didn't see a single person that was falling over, needed help, or anything like that. Whereas, like if you go to a traditional music festival,
Oh,
say
forget.
Coachella, ACL, I don't know, I'd wager to say 1 in 5 people should probably be at home, right, or be taken home. So
Absolutely.
it's a very conscious and self-aware group of people who sort of understand the dynamics of what taking things can do to you. So I guess it's more just to say like there's some veteran partiers there, and they know how to handle themselves, and it's really impressive to see.
No, and that's a great transition into the next topic I did want to discuss when it comes to consciousness and awareness. I honestly, guys, to all the people that are listening, I wanted Benjamin on the podcast because when I started following him, I really, really enjoyed his content. I feel like him and I have a lot of similar mindsets when it comes to mental health, when it comes to physical health, when it comes to performance, and being aware and being conscious of where our thoughts are, of what we're doing with our time, of what we're putting in our body, from the air we breathe to how much sun we receive in the morning. That was one thing that really attracted me to you, Benjamin. And I say this with the utmost sincerity, is I really, really do enjoy the stuff you talk about. So when it comes to, being really conscious, well, what are some of the exercises that you like to partake in every single day? Or what has been the biggest change or the thing that has made the biggest impact in you becoming more and more conscious over time?
That's a challenging question. I would say I think of them sort of separately, right? So there's like being conscious, which is I guess just being aware of like your physical body, your emotional body, and your spiritual body, and then the sort of like ascendance of that is like consciousness, right? So you could argue they're sort of synonymous or similar, but that's kind of how I break it down. So I think being conscious is again, you're catching me a bit on the spot here, but just being really aware and understanding like what you're putting in your body, where you're putting your body, who you're spending time with, what you're consuming from a media standpoint, just the environments, both inner and outer, that you create around yourself, and just being thoughtful about that. So, I think it's pretty easy to fall into the trap where you're not really, consciously, no pun intended, choosing, the food you're eating, the water you're drinking, where you're sleeping, the air quality, the people you spend your time with, the media you consume. Very quickly, society has evolved, especially in the last 10 years, to the point where people are all kind of on autopilot. And I think if you don't take a second to like pause and just kind of examine, the choices you're making in life at a very basic and primal level, then I would encourage you to do so. And, in my journey, I've just sort of like been fortunate to stumble across people who kind of helped me wake up a little bit. And, frankly, it's not that difficult to just take stock on, what's the air quality like in my house? What is the quality of the water I'm drinking? Let me look at the friends that I'm hanging out with. Are these people that are adding value to me and are making me a better person and are supportive? Or are they taking away from my life experience? So, those are some basic exercises or thought exercises you could participate in. But yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. So again, the only thing I would caveat with is saying you don't want to over engineer your life to the point where it's like too rigid and structured and, I guess, quote unquote, like over planned. But I do think bringing some awareness, for lack of a better word, to the choices you make in the environments you put yourself in is highly important.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I'd like to talk about awareness a lot on this podcast, not only to benefit my audience, but also to benefit myself. You don't know much about me, but I've been now a certified life coach, certified nutritionist for a little over 3 years. And even though the financial compensation that I receive from my clients and the fulfillment and accomplishment and the sense of purpose that I get from helping people lose weight and helping people get sober and helping people get out of debt and things like that is great. But the biggest value that I gained from being a life coach and in this space is that I become a better person every single day, because I step into this obligation and responsibility that I now have to be the best version of myself. So I really did appreciate all the things that you talk about when it comes to that. And then pivoting towards philosophy, when we talk about life, we talk about consciousness, we talk about philosophy. We think of people like Marcus Aurelius, and Aristotle and things like that. But when you think about philosophy, what is something that you're trying to really gain as you dive deeper into somewhat of a philosophical figure and identify as that philosopher?
Yeah, so I turned to philosophy sort of out of chance. So I just started reading fairly aggressively, probably 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And eventually, if you do enough reading, you sort of come across the Stoics, and that's what happened with me. Sort of vis-a-vis Ryan Holiday. He I think lives just outside of Austin, so have a few mutual friends and had a number of people sort of recommend his book. So that was kind of my first portal into the space, and from there just sort of explored his various books, and then the books that he writes about as well. So think like Meditations from Marcus Aurelius, The Tao of Seneca by Seneca, etc. And from there I sort of got into a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Taoism, and I'm really this year a big part of my book plan for the year is to read a little bit deeper into other philosophies as well. So Hinduism, more about yoga, etc. So that's kind of like my journey over the last few years. I would say the reason I've turned to it and the reason it has resonated with me and so many others, especially young men, is because of the secularization of society, right? So we've kind of moved away from, or we've not kind of, we've definitely moved away from religion. And we could talk all day about whether religion is good or bad, but I think that the obvious upside to it is there's like a clear set of morals and guiding living principles that it provides. And without that, folks are sort of operating in life without a compass. So I think philosophy has sort of had a renaissance in the sense that like all these ancient texts have kind of filled the void for folks that have moved away from traditional organized religion. So that's a little bit about my journey and why I think it's come to the forefront of popularity, and I think it's here to stay.
Well said. And I agree 100%. I love that. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Of all these philosophical principles that you've learned and read about in Meditations, what's one that you should be doing more of, or what's one that you seem to stray away from, committing to? What's been a challenge for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone, not everyone, but most people are probably a little bit guilty about talking about other people. So look, I'm not one to like gossip and quote unquote like shit talk people, right? But in certain moments, I have found it comforting to talk to my dear and close friends or romantic partners or whatever about others. And the reality is like, I don't think that that's like a high integrity way to live your life. And even if you're not saying particularly bad things about you, it's sort of a waste of time. So that's something I'm trying to be a bit more conscious of in 2023 and beyond. But again, it's not like a major problem, and it's not something I'm like getting into trouble for and creating, stirring up gossip in my hometown about. But it's something I'm trying to be a bit more conscious about. That, of course, like many of the Stoics talk about too. So that's one thing I'm focused on. And then I think one of the main driving principles that everyone could always do better, including myself, is just continuing to regulate your emotions. Obviously, you want to experience emotions. Like anger is okay to experience. Sadness is okay to experience, but being able to at least modulate or regulate rather how you respond to that is what matters most. And I think that's where most people fall short.
I love that. Yeah, I really, really enjoy that. And then what philosophical principle you think that you've acted upon and executed and applied to your life has made the biggest impact over time?
Yeah. So I mean, I used to still do, but not really, have a bit of a temper. And I think it was a combination of things like the dynamic in a competitive household, which is mostly a good thing, but can lead to that. So that's part of it for me, but not all of it. That's for sure. Certainly getting my hormones in order was a part of it. I also think bringing more awareness to the way I like operate and move in society too, and social interactions, both big and small, was important. And then, honestly, just like optimizing my sleep to make sure that I'm well rested and, in a good place from that front. Those four things and more has kind of helped me really bring any sort of like reactivity or irrational response, awareness to it, and then allowed me to really regulate it. So one thing I think I've done really well is basically just learning to regulate my emotions and how I respond, even in times of like danger or, people attacking me verbally or physically. So yeah, I would say like that's a big strength of mine that I'm pretty proud of over the last few years. And I think it's been a big unlock for me, both in my personal life, my romantic endeavors, my business relationships, etc.
Congratulations. I'm proud of you that you're proud of yourself. And my question on that is, how do you regulate your emotions? emotions. When you're in that moment of like, oh my God, I feel anger, how do you regulate your emotion? And what's some advice you have for people to?
Yeah. So I think the first part is just one, like it sounds cliche or obvious. It's just bringing awareness to it. So just the fact that you're aware of it is a big step. Once you're aware of it, if you're able to, in a small setting where it's like not that inflammatory, so to speak, where like, let's say you just like call me a name or something, I'm able to kind of regulate and take a pause. Once you do that and you experience what it's like to not respond rashly to someone, you realize that that is the way. And once you realize that that is the way, it starts to compound and you start to do it over and over again, and to the point where it gets, basically, habituated in your psyche. In my view, and again, I'm not a psychologist, so there's probably a more technical way to describe this. This is just my lived experience. And you start to really experience the benefits of regulating your emotions. I think, like with any good habit formation, once you start to see results from something, you really start to build forward momentum, and you don't really deviate. So an analog would be like, if you're trying to lose weight, and I assume you could probably comment on this better than me. If you're trying to lose weight, well, if you lose, 5 to 10 pounds in the first, few weeks or whatever in a healthy way, and you see that weight shedding off, you'll be more compelled to keep going. So that's really like the comparison I'm drawing here is like, once you realize that, controlling your emotions or how you respond, especially in negative scenarios, is a net win for you. It's just a net positive. It's good for everyone, frankly. You'll start to habituate that behavior and hopefully bring it into other parts of your life too.
Amazing. Now, is there a way to channel positive emotions, like high frequency emotions, and regulating those? Or do we kind of just surrender and just allow like love, appreciation, gratitude and kindness to kind of just fill our heart, and just try to like hone in on that and focus on that and allow that to resonate as long and as positive as possible?
Yeah, it's a tough dance. I mean, everyone's different, right? We're all exposed to different levels of stress. So I would say the first step is awareness. The second step is regulating how you respond. And then the third step is how you transmute that energy to either, good or bad in some cases, but obviously hopefully for good. And yeah, I would say for me, a big unlock was I read this book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer.
Love that book.
Yeah, it's a tremendous book, and it's an easy read. And essentially the message, without ruining it for everyone, is, if you just let things happen in life, and not in a way that like makes you powerless or doesn't, have decisiveness, but if you just sort of surrender to the universe, so to speak, a lot of good will come your way, assuming you're acting in integrity. So that was a huge unlock for me. I actually read that like 2 weeks before I went to Burning Man, and ever since then, I'll tell you, like, all the other things I mentioned on this call were just part of it. That was the biggest unlock in my life so far. So I'll give you some examples, right? A few unfortunate things have happened, like in my business, in my personal lives, in my romantic lives, since then. And instead of like, spiraling or, throwing a temper tantrum, whatever the negative reaction might be, you just sort of surrender to it and appreciate like, hey, this is happening for a reason. There's clearly a lesson here. And once you really actually believe that, and you start to respond like that to when bad things, quote unquote, bad things happen to you, or difficult things happen to you, your whole life changes. A lot of people like to talk about that they react to things positively, but I always thought I did until like I actually started living and breathing that philosophy. And that was a huge unlock for me.
Oh, love that. For all the people that are listening, if you haven't heard of Michael Singer, he's the author of The Untethered Soul. Very popular book, sold multiple million copies. And Surrender Experiment is somewhat of his autobiography in a way. It's a story of his life, how he just like randomly drove to Mexico and he met this amazing family and he lived with them for a little bit. And then just long story short, he built multiple $100 million companies without even trying. It is really the end of, and please add to it if you could. I'm trying to just kind of summarize it as best as possible, but to all those people out there, if you haven't heard of Michael Singer and The Untethered Soul, also Surrender Experiment, highly recommend. Books about consciousness, books about awareness, books about your relationship with your thoughts and your mind, because guys, you are not your mind, you are not your thoughts, you're the awareness of these things. So and I know you're super busy. We're going to finish up this podcast in the next couple minutes, and I had Ben Greenfield on the podcast about 2 weeks ago. I'm sure you might know who that is, maybe not. Big guy into biohacking, and I feel like all of us kind of have some similar interests and things like that. And I just started like asking him random questions about his personal life. And I'm going to just ask him random questions. It could be yes or no. I want you to kind of answer as succinctly as possible. We don't have to go into too much detail about it, but I want to learn more about you. And if it's too personal, you don't want to answer, you can just not answer. My first question, do you drink alcohol?
No.
Okay. Do you smoke marijuana?
Maybe once or twice a year.
Okay. Do you use plant medicine at all?
Yes.
Okay. How scared are you or worried are you of EMF radiation from Bluetooth, 5G, and Wi-Fi?
I would say on a scale of 0 being not at all scared to 10 being very scared, I would say a 5 or a 6.
Okay. How much time do you spend consuming entertainment on social media or TV?
Probably,
If
yeah, I'd say 60 to 75 minutes a day. I
okay.
recently checked that actually, and that was about what it's at. I don't really watch TV at all. I rarely watch movies, and I mostly what I was just mentioning is like Instagram and Twitter, and I try to curate that who I'm looking at there to mostly be friends and not really any news or negative stuff. I'm okay with, an hour, even though when you compound that number over like your lifetime, it still is like a staggering number. As long as it's not like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, I'm okay with a little bit of, social media consumption as long as it's positive and, helps me out as a person or makes me better.
Good. I like that answer. Do you take any supplements?
Yes, I do.
Which ones?
They're all based on my blood work. So I take a B vitamin complex. I take magnesium. I take vitamin D with K1 and K2. I take Shilajit for testosterone and male sex hormone production. I take Tongat Ali for those same reasons as well. I take boron to lower my sex hormone binding globulin, which is related to testosterone. And then I also take quercetin and fish oil.
Okay. Awesome. How many days a week do you weight train?
4.
Okay. And any cardio?
I walk 10 to 12,000 steps every morning. So that I kind of count as my cardio, but I definitely do sprints once a week at the end of one of those 4 sessions. And I'll also do sort of like a 30-minute AMRAP in one of those sessions as well, which gets like more steady state, higher elevated heart rate training as well.
Nice. Where did you get that protocol from?
I have a coach who I've had for probably 6 or 7 years, but if you recently saw the Huberman Lab release that basically was like, this is what you should be doing if you're doing anything for exercise. Fortunately, my coach was already training me like that and has been for years. So
It sounds pretty spot on.
Yeah, we're getting a super, aerobic session, a super anaerobic session, and then 3 or 4 days of strength training with compound movements, and then some bodybuilding stuff, as well as like kettlebell flows, mobility, and stuff. So it's a really well-rounded program. And then you add the walking in. I feel like I'm pretty bulletproof.
Intermittent fasting, good, bad, right? For some people, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, for men, it seems to be fine from what I've read. Most of the smart people I've listened to seem to think it's okay. Obviously, it's a bit more complicated, as are most things for women because of the hormones involved there and whatnot. But speaking from my experience, yeah, I typically stick to like 14 to 15 hour fasting windows. So I'll eat, within an 8 or 9 hour period each day. And I'm actually about to do like a few multi-day fasts for the first time. So just curious, just for testing perspective.
Right.
I just want to see what that does to my body. So yeah, I'll be tracking that.
Okay. Do you or have you ever voted?
Yes.
Okay. And are you going to continue to vote moving forward?
Yes.
Okay. And last question, do you believe in God?
Sort of.
Expand on that a little bit before we wrap up. Last question, Tom.
Yeah, I think there's a higher power. What does that God look like? Who am I to say? I think having traveled through the psychedelic realms, I would say, look, maybe it's a figment of my imagination, but there's so many consistencies across the various plant medicines in my experience, and then what other people are also seeing. It makes me think there's some sort of like shared consciousness. And look, like this is a whole conversation for another time, but my gut instinct would say like there's something. If you ask me what it is exactly, like I'm not qualified to tell you. Hopefully that at least gives you like a somewhat answer.
Love it. Amazing. Benjamin Smith. Guys, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to drop the link to letsgodisco.com and also all of Benjamin's socials. If you're listening on Spotify, Audible, or Apple Podcasts, you can follow Benjamin on Instagram at itmebenji, ITMEBENJI. If you haven't already subscribed, leave a review, Really appreciate it, guys. Benjamin, thank you so much for your time today. It was amazing to connect with you one-on-one. If there's anything I can do to support you, let me know.
Yeah, appreciate it, Zach. Thanks for having me on.
What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for being a loyal listener of the podcast. If you haven't already gotten my first book, Live Better Now, it's officially out on Amazon.com. I want to give a huge thank you to everyone that's already purchased the book, reviewed the book, or shared it with friends and family. It really, really means a lot to me. Thank you guys so much. Go ahead and visit Amazon.com and purchase Live Better Now.